Welcome to Rock and Roll High School, your choice for in-depth and personal conversations with the most legendary artists in the history of contemporary music. Come with us as we explore the albums and songs that have become the soundtrack of our lives. Here's your host, Pete Ganbarg.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rock and Roll High School. Our guest this week is one of the true architects of a band that didn't just define a sound, but somehow managed to define multiple sounds across more than 5 decades while never losing its identity. Patrick Simmons is a founding member of the legendary Doobie Brothers, and the rare artist whose musical voice helped shape the band from its earliest days through every chapter that followed. From the acoustic-driven groove of Black Water, a song that began as a B-side and became a #1 hit, to the rich melodic textures he brought to albums like The Captain and Me, Patrick's songwriting and guitar work have always expanded what the Doobie Brothers could be. He's one of the few musicians in rock history to successfully navigate a band through radically different eras, from the guitar-driven early years alongside Tom Johnston, to the sophisticated soul-infused sound of the Michael McDonald period, not by competing for the spotlight, but by creating space, contrast, and balance. And more than 50 years later, he's still doing it, writing, recording, and touring at the highest level, including the band's recent album, Walk This Road, and their current run of major shows with Santana. In this conversation, Patrick reflects on the evolution of the Doobie Brothers, the art of staying creative inside a long-running band, and what it really takes to adapt without losing sight of who you are.
Darling, you're always there at the rescue. Depending on you. Darling, you're always there by my side. You're always there by my side. Darling, you're always there at my rescue. Hey, hey, hey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Rock and Roll High School. Very happy to welcome from Washington State, Patrick Simmons from the Doobie Brothers. Hi, Pat. How are you?
Very good, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The last time I saw you is when you were being inducted along with the guys, with Mike and Tom, into the Songwriters Hall of Fame last year. And that was a great night, and it's great to see you again.
Nice to see you, too. It was quite a night, wasn't it?
It was. You know, you guys are in the Vocal Group Hall of Fame, you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and now you're in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Any Hall of Fames left?
The Hall of Shame is
the Hall of Shame. There you go. You know, what's fascinating to me about your career is that you're the guy who's been there from the beginning. And the through line is you've been on every Doobies album. You were there in the very beginning. It's actually 51 years to the week that Black Water was #1. So happy birthday to Black Water is #1, mid-March of 1975. We're recording this in mid-March of 2026. And you guys are going on the road again this year. You're going to go out and play with my old pal Carlos, Doobie Brothers and Santana, playing all summer. So are you still as excited to go out there and play for the people with the guys as you've ever been? Or is it now, you know, a gig and this is what you do? Or how do you feel?
Probably both, you know. I mean, I love playing. I kind of look forward to the tours. I play all the time. I'm always trying to write something or just tweaking around. You know, I got a little home studio, a couple places. Most of the time I live in Hawaii and I have a little studio there, and I'm always, you know, trying to make time to go in there and just, you know, play around. I recently switched from Pro Tools as a method of recording to Logic Pro.
Right.
Both are great platforms, but I dumped my hard drive a few years ago in my computer, and then I was going to have to reconstitute the program. So I thought, well, you know, my friends have been talking about Logic Pro. My son uses it; he really likes it, so I'm going to try it. And so that's kind of what I've been doing, and those are just, you know, ways to keep your, you know, feet in the water. And then I'm always looking forward to, you know, when you tour for months and months, or you do shows on and off, you sort of, you get a little tired, and traveling is really the hard part. Playing is just what it's called, playing. You're playing, you're having fun, So, when you're away from it for a while, you get away from it, then you start to get thirst for it again. And that's kind of where it is happening for me. But like I say, I try to play all the time.
And when you're in the studio playing around with Logic, are you writing and recording new things? Are you rediscovering old things? What are you doing?
Working on new songs primarily. That's my whole, I do a little bit of home recording on records that we've done, albums and stuff for myself and other people, doing parts and things on records. But for the most part, it's a writing tool for me, and I'm always working on something because I just enjoy that.
When you're in the studio all the time working on new stuff, is it always kind of going into the folder for what could be the next Doobies album?
It is, or it's just going in my own personal folder, really, as to trying to accomplish something. And the act of writing is just I think like any artist, and I like to call myself an artist.
I think you qualify at this point.
I aspire to it anyway. Some people call it arts, and some people call it farts. But I'm always working on something, and really, it's the process that is exciting as anything. I think that old adage, it's the journey getting someplace that's more fun than the arrival.
Right.
And
sure.
And so that's what I think working in writing songs and working on creative projects does. It's good for your psyche. It's good for your heart.
If you're a creative person, you have to create. Painter's going to paint, writer's going to write, singer's going to sing. That's what you have to do.
Exactly. It's kind of a muscular activity, music. You got to keep the neurons connected.
100%. So you mentioned the journey. Let's go back to the beginning of the journey, because the Doobies are now over 55 years old. And you've been there from the beginning. When you guys started out, I've heard you talk about the day that you started jamming with Tom and Mike for the first time. But was it something in the beginning where you would ever think this far in the future and say, oh shit, I've been doing this for 55 years under the name the Doobie Brothers?
No, not in a million years. I always knew I would be good friends with those guys for a long time, from the first time we really met and started hanging out. That was really the basis of our relationship. Certainly, as a musician, I respected Tom and John Hartman. Those two guys were my first real connection with the band. I always knew I would be friends with them. And then we played music together, of course, because we were all musicians, and that was really enjoyable. And then finally, they invited me to come and play a gig with them. And that was the beginning of the band as it is.
Right.
But I don't think I had any idea that we'd be doing it for this long. It was really just, we'll do a few gigs, and I like these guys, and we'll be friends now for.
Well, how many musicians are there that can say they have been part of one of the most successful artists of all time for over 50 years and never really wasn't? Even the times that the band took a break, it's not like they went on without you. It was either the band takes a break, the band comes back, and you've been part of the whole thing. You mentioned John Hartman and Tom in the beginning. Were those guys in a different group before you started playing with them?
Tom and John were living together, and actually probably the bass player too was living with them for a while. Greg Murphy was the guy. John and Greg came out from the East Coast, Virginia. I think they were living in Falls Church. I think that's Virginia, near Georgetown anyway. And they came out just to check out California. And John had this obsession with the Moby Grape. I guess he had bought the Moby Grape album, and he came out to California, and lo and behold.
Where did John Hartman come out from?
From Falls Church.
And where did Tom come from?
Tom came from Visalia. Tom and I were both students at San Jose State College.
Speaking of San Jose, sorry to cut you off, but congratulations. I know last week you won what is it? The Spartan for Life type of thing from San Jose State?
We got a Lifetime Achievement Award as former alumnus, alumni, I don't know.
And did you ever graduate?
San Jose State. I did not graduate.
But you can still, for all of you college students out there who are thinking about dropping out, you just know that you can be honored even if you don't graduate, right? That's a lesson we can learn from Pat today.
I'm about a semester short. I think Tommy might be the same. We both, we wanted to go to college and get an education, but we were also trying to stay out in front of getting drafted and going to Vietnam at the time. It was kind of like, an unholy war. Everybody had figured out that there was nothing going on other than feeding the military-industrial complex in those years. Right. Unfortunately.
Right. This is the late 60s, so you're right both of you guys are right in the middle of all that. You were born in 48, so this is, you're 18, 19, 20 years old, and that's, you're right in the bullseye of the draft. And luckily, I've heard you say you got a high number. So
yeah, that's when we figured, we got high numbers so we can, or for myself anyway, I'm going to take a break from college.
Right.
Because of that.
So back to the John Hartman moving west in search of Moby Grape. Talk about Skip Spence and the role that he plays.
So John got out to California, and lo and behold, he must have known that the guys were in the area or something. But Skip, he had some mental problems. He was rapidly losing touch with reality, and he had moved to San Jose with his wife and his children to downtown San Jose, and he was in a little duplex in downtown. And it was right next to the laundromat, and I was in doing my laundry one day, and Skip walks in, and I recognized him. I had met him years before, and I was a huge Moby Grape fan. Arguably, they were one of the best San Francisco bands of that era in terms of their musicianship and songwriting and arrangements and so on.
But how random that Skip Spence walks into the San Jose laundromat.
Yeah, it was very random. And he had just put out an album called Horror, which was a very strange kind of misconstrued project. There he was anyway. So I started talking to him, and we became, friends from that evening. It was in the evening. So I visited him on several occasions after that, and we hit it off, as friends and musicians. So I don't know, maybe a couple of years later, a year and a half later, I was doing a show in a club in San Jose, and Skip had been booked as the headliner, and I was the opener. He came in with Tom and John and Greg Murphy. They had a trio around town. They had various names. The last name that I remember was Pud, after the bubblegum comic character Pud. Probably a double entendre there of some sort.
Sure. So John was successful in his trek east to west, not only finding Skip, but ending up jamming with him and bringing Tom along.
Exactly. It was just, serendipity, but it really was a dream come true for him. And I knew all the guys in the Grape. They were really a San Francisco band, but Skip was from San Jose, and the other guys had moved back to the South Bay. And so I was, friends with Jerry Miller and Bob Mosley, Peter Lewis. And anyway, they were all great guys. That was my introduction to Tom and John. They were playing this gig with Skip. And really, Tom was more of the focal point than Skip in the band. Tom was doing most of the singing, all the lead playing.
Was he writing his own songs back then?
And he had written several songs. There were some original material he was doing, as well as some covers. It was very impressive. I was really, I thought, God, he's a great singer. And John just was a wonderful showman and really a great hard rock drummer, Ginger Baker type. That's one of his idol, but Pattern is playing after Ginger.
Right. And that night they approached you, John approached you, right? And said, hey, you should come by the house and we should jam together.
Yes. Yeah. When we were done playing, Skip said, oh, Pat, let me introduce you to the guys. And so I met them, and then John said, hey, we really enjoyed, what you did. You should come by. We're trying to put, a bigger band together, and Skip might be a part of it. We don't know, but we'd love to have you involved if you're interested. And I said, well, I have a couple of, I was playing at that time. I was playing with our later bass player, Tyran Porter. We had a band in town. It was a trio, myself, Tyran, and a violin player. And then when I met the guys, I was playing with the banjo player, Pete Grant. And so I was involved in several things. I said, well, I don't know, I've been doing these other things. And I wasn't sure I was cut out to play enough. They were a little harder edge band. And I thought, I'm more doing this bluegrass and kind of folky stuff. I'm not sure that I would fit into this, but I liked them, and I knew that they were really talented guys, and it was fun just hanging with them. And so I did. I went over to the house, and Tom and I sat around with acoustic guitars. That's when I knew that, he's not just a hard rock player. He could play any kind of music, and so we really hit it off. And
right. I think a big part of the success of the band and the longevity of the band is that contrast between your acoustic, melodic sensibility on guitar and Tom's more electric, rhythmic rock feel and R&B feel. And those two things coming together as a contrast really becomes part of the band's DNA.
Absolutely. That's kind of a little, I don't know, magical thing between us. I play electric music as well, but at this point I was a little more traditional, but I had played the blues and I had played pop music. And
who were your musical influences growing up?
Early on, the Everly Brothers, probably my favorite artist of all time when I was a kid was Bill Haley and the Comets.
Wow.
So I had, that sensibility in terms of rock and roll, and was really the roots of rock and roll. Those guys, Elvis Presley, of course, Chuck Berry. I was a huge Little Richard fan.
It wasn't like you were just into the folk stuff. You were actually into the early rock stuff.
Right. The music that I listened to was different from the music I was playing at that time.
Got it.
Yeah, that was the music that really captured my imagination early on, was that early rock and roll. Bobby Darin, the Coasters,
the good stuff.
Odd stuff. Yeah, I just love that. I was fortunate. I had a friend that was not drafted. I think he joined the Army. He left his entire record collection with with our family when he went to boot camp in Fort Ord. So for a year, I had this incredible record collection. Our family did, and I listened to his records over. There were 40. He had 45s in one of those sleeved record holders.
That's awesome.
I sat there and listened for hours, days at a time. I would just sit there and listen to that music. I fell in love with rock and roll.
That's awesome. So at what point does Pud kind of peter out? No pun intended. And then you guys come up with a name because you like to partake in the herb, as they say. So your friend Keith says, why don't you call yourselves the Doobie Brothers? And it's a temporary name, and it just has now been temporary for around 55 years.
I think that was late 69, probably, when that happened. Mid 69, I can't remember, but actually Tom and John, and at the time Greg Murphy left, and they ended up with our bass player was a guy I went to high school with, Dave Sjogren. He was a year younger than I was, and Tom said, we have kind of reformed the band a little bit, and we have this new bass player, and they called me and said, we have this gig at the Chateau, and I had already played there with my trio, Tyran and Mike Mindell, this fiddle player. So Tom called me and said, we got this gig at the Chateau. We could really use your help. Would you be interested in coming and playing and do some of your songs, some of our songs, and then we'll have enough material to do the night. And I said, absolutely, that sounds really fun. and we get paid, so and we were all starving. We were all on food stamps at the time, scraping by. So I went over to the house and we rehearsed a little bit. That's where I saw Dave Sjogren. He was the bass player now. And we worked for days and pulled a set together. And then we didn't have a name. So we needed something. We needed to let them know. They want to know what we're calling ourselves.
Sure, you need a name if you're going to play a gig.
Yeah, that's when our friend said, you guys smoke so much pot, you should call yourselves the Doobie Brothers. And we went, that's terrible. Let's do it.
Little did you know, right?
Yeah, we thought it would be for that night only. And then we were very successful with our gig. They loved us at the club. We got hired again. They wanted to bring us back the next weekend. So we had to stick with our name.
Got it. At what point did the label start coming around? I've heard you tell a story about the great Lenny Waronker and Ted Templeman showing up as kind of fishes out of water at a biker bar to see the band play.
Skip had this in a studio in San Mateo, and he had already taken Tom and John, and they'd done a couple of songs, recorded Pacific recording in San Mateo, and they went in there and recorded a couple of songs. They said we could come back in and do some more. He said, I've been writing some tunes, and then we have these songs of yours that we've been doing, working on for our live thing. Would you want to go and try to record them? So I said, of course. So we went up to, first time I'd ever been in a real recording studio. So I went with the guys, and it was a 16-track recording studio, which was, a major leap for me personally.
Sure.
But we did about we ended up with 6 songs before we were through. The guy who ran the studio says, I've got some ins with some studio people, and I think I could, maybe get you guys a deal. So we said, yeah, well, duh, let's go. But
he said, sign here first, gentlemen.
Oh yeah. Oh no, we signed everything. We signed it all away.
Was that Paul or was that Marty?
Well, Paul was at the forefront of it, but Marty Cohn was right there alongside him. They kind of took us for a ride, and
right.
They took all the money, and we got pennies, but
it was only for a couple of records, I assume, right?
It was the one record, and then Warner's had the option, and they had decided not to pick up our option at the time because we were screwballs, and our first record didn't do well, and then we ran up a bill trying to make a second record, producing it ourselves. We insisted we could do a better job, which of course we couldn't. But so they had put us on suspension. They had not picked up our option. So right. Marty and Paul said, well, we're done with you guys. Goodbye.
Well, that might be the best thing that ever happened to the young band, right?
Oh, absolutely. They walked away and left us. They came back years later and said, wait a minute, where's the money you owe us? We go, what?
What's funny about this guy, Paul, is that not only did he find a Northern California band in the Doobie Brothers that he could, make the first recordings and try to get them to sign away everything. He also did the same thing for Metallica later on.
He did it to several bands. I think Tower of Power had the same, similar. Wow. He would take everybody's demos, and then once they were gone, or once he had washed his hands of the band, then he'd take their demos and make deals around the world with everybody's demos.
Takes all kinds. Everybody's good at something.
Oh yeah, he was.
Talk about how, the demo gets in the hands of Warner Brothers and Ted and Lenny. Ted becomes your longtime record producer. Lenny Waronker, one of the most legendary, talented, genius record men of all time. Talk about the night they showed up to see the band.
Paul took the album actually to several different labels, and we had interest from a couple of labels at the time. We did showcases. They came to see us, and they were both interested in signing us. But we decided Warner Brothers would be a better fit for us. But before we would get signed, of course, they wanted to come in. Our showcase was they came to the Chateau Liberté, Lenny Waronker and Ted Templeman. At that point in time, neither one of those guys were totally straight or anything, but by this time they had joined the corporate structure there at Warner Brothers, and so they had tried to clean up their act a little bit. Both of them were, probably former hippies, if you will.
Reformed hippies.
They came to see us at the Chateau, and they were both dressed very straight. I think Ted had like a sweater vest on or something, and Lenny was wearing a sweater
tied around the collar,
button down collars and stuff. And
so they probably stood out that night, right?
And slacks and
right.
penny loafers, different kind of image. And of course, they walk into this place, and there's like a dozen Hell's Angels, standing around the front of before you'd even come into the club. There's a bunch of bikers out front and motorcycles parked, right across the parking lot in front. And they walk in and play. And we, by that time, had established ourselves as sort of the house band. So there's probably 300 people in this club that was built for about 150 people. Right. Sweaty, hot, smoky. Those are the days when everybody could smoke, and smoking weed, smoking cigarettes. It was a bar, so everybody was drinking. Right. And we were playing at full volume, as loud as we could go. It was happening. They loved us there, so people are like stomping on the floor, and and it was an old redwood structure. So it was sitting, up off the ground, and the whole building was made out of wood. So when people were stomping their feet or something, the whole place would just vibrate, literally, the whole structure. So that was going on, and we were playing and having a great time. And I look across the room, and it was easy to. We knew they were coming, and it was their eyes were like saucers,
They were probably easy to pick out of a lineup that night.
Oh yeah. And so we finished playing, and of course we walked over to the table, and they shook hands with us, and they were just so nice and said, "Oh, you guys sounded great. We've been listening to your demos. We love what you're doing. This is, it's so great to see you live and see, feel the energy here. This is really, this is so good. You guys got to have something special. We'd love to sign you to the label." And wow. We said, "We're ready." And that was the beginning for us.
Yeah. And that relationship, not only with you guys and Warner Brothers, but you guys and Ted Templeman as your long-term producer, lasted over a decade. I just realized you guys put out an album a couple of years ago called Liberté. Was that an homage to the Chateau Liberté?
It was. And Ted, let's see, the album before that, what was it? World Gone Crazy. Ted produced that record.
Right. So that was the first album that he had produced for you in close to 30 years, since I think One Step Closer.
Yeah, he had retired several years before that. I don't know, probably 15, 20 years before that. So we write songs together. We wrote a bunch of songs together. We wrote 3 songs together for that record. How
is he doing now in 2026, Ted Templeman?
He's doing good. He's getting old like the rest of us, but but he's doing good. He's still got a great sense of humor, and he loves telling story. He remembers all the funny stuff that happened to us. He loves to talk about the funny things that happened in the studio. And
there's a book that he co-wrote about his career. You and Tom wrote a book a couple of years ago. So these stories are there for the reading for anyone who wants to dig deeper. But the records that you guys made with Ted, it was the band, Ted and Don Landy, his engineer. Ted and Don would also end up going and doing the same thing with Van Halen.
Right. Ted's book highlights a lot of the things that brought him through those years.
He was an artist originally, wasn't he?
He played drums, keyboards, a lot of instruments. trumpet. He was a trumpet player.
Nice. Nice.
Originally, but grew up in Santa Cruz.
Wasn't he part of the Beau Brummels?
No, but he worked with those guys.
Right. Right.
I was good friends with Sal as well, the lead singer.
Right. Right.
Who I thought was a fantastic singer. I was aware of him before I ever, was, playing with our band when I was in high school.
Right.
They had a very successful run. The Beau Brummels did.
Yeah, and there's a whole history with Warner Brothers and Tom Donahue, Ted Templeman, and Lenny, and it's all kind of like interwoven. If our listeners want to dig deep.
Yeah, later on, Sal had a band called Stone Ground, out of which many artists. It was just a huge band that he put together of a bunch of musicians around the Bay Area, and I think they toured Europe. It was a Warner Brothers sponsored thing, but they made several albums, and a lot of those artists went on to play with different people. Right. Alvin Bishop,
right.
Hot Tuna, different bands around the Bay Area.
Very creatively fertile area. So you guys go in and you make your first album with Lenny and Ted, and that's the album that you said didn't do great. Then you go in, you start producing yourself. That doesn't go great. And then Ted comes back, and inspired by your time in New Orleans, you name the album Toulouse Street. And all of a sudden, it starts going. Listen to the music, Tom's song. Rocking Down the Highway. Jesus Is Just All Right, the cover with your vocals with Tom, becomes a platinum album.
Jesus is just all right with me. Jesus is just all right, oh yeah. Jesus is just all right with me. Jesus is just all right. I don't care what they may say. I don't care what they may do. I don't care what they may say. Jesus is just all right, oh yeah.
Yeah, we were really lucked out on that one. Ted rescued us. We loved what we were doing. We screwed up in that we went in the studio and wasted a bunch of money smoking weed and,
Well, you gotta live up to your name of the band.
Exactly. Getting high in the studio and just, jamming, thinking we were going to be, come up with some brilliance. So we had all these albums were coming out with, I think Moby Grape had something called Grape Jam, and Steve Stills and Al Cooper and Mike Bloomfield had put something out. So we thought, all we have to do is what those guys do, and we can have an album,
and the label's like, not so fast. You guys need an adult in the room.
Yeah, and those, by the way, those albums were horrible too. I don't know how the label let them release those records.
It must have been something in the air or something, in the bloodstream.
Yeah, everybody was doing that. But anyway, Ted rescued us, and we went on to
make all these amazing records with Ted. The next album, Captain and Me, is another big hit. That's when Skunk starts guesting, Skunk Baxter, who's been on this podcast, starts guesting on one of your songs on South City Midnight Lady.
South City Midnight Lady, I'm much obliged indeed. You sure have saved this man whose soul was in need. I thought there was no reason for all these things I do, but the smile that I sent out.
It's really interesting that this coming off of Stevie Wonder had just released Music on My Mind with Malcolm Cecil and Bob Margolef's Tonto, the first synthesizer, and you guys reach out to them and they come and they work with you on this album, which is really interesting.
We had been paying attention to both Tom and I love Stevie Wonder. I think we had been to Europe and we met him and we saw him doing so many interesting things musically. And then the album came out and it was just such a great album and so innovative for the times, for any time, but for that time particularly. After the Beatles did Sgt. Pepper's, you just wondered, can anybody do anything new that's going to be exciting? And,
can you top this? Right.
Right. And not that he topped it or anything, but it was a new direction sonically that I felt was an undiscovered direction. And, Stevie did it with R&B and then, we were thought, wow, this is the new direction for music. And I think Bill Payne, now later on, Bill had graduated to it, but no one really had that capability, very few. And those guys, we saw that and we thought, how can we incorporate that into our music? So Ted said, well, I can do this. I'm the producer. Let me reach out. And so he contacted them and they were excited about the prospect of coming over to do it. In fact, I think they were already in the country, maybe coming over to do other things. So they brought this setup. It was so amazing. It was just a patch bay. I don't know if you've ever seen any of that.
It's crazy. It was just the wires going into different patches.
Right. They would have 1/4-inch plugs, and you would plug into different.
Right. So if you want a horn sound, or if you want this, or you want that, it's all kind of like mad scientisting.
Yeah, you'd have a sine wave on one in one input and a spike wave on another, and together they created another wave, and that's how you produce. Either or a pop, 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 something you could make or you could make these cool waves, which today is, easily done.
People don't realize this was the future back then. So having these two mad scientists in the studio with you must have been peering into the future.
It was wonderful. And they were two completely different people, like Robert McGullough is British and he had this jacket with buttons all over it, different kinds of, when I say buttons, I mean like buttons that you button your shirt, but super fancy and colorful. And the whole jacket was covered with these buttons. And then that was Robert. And then Malcolm was like a t-shirt and hush puppies, awesome. Just this kind of like a nerdy high school guy,
Right.
So together they worked so well together, and Malcolm was sort of quiet and reserved and slow speaking, and Robert was like loud and movements, and it was just a really wonderful experience.
Yeah, and it worked. And that album, Captain and Me, was a big hit. And then the next album, the fourth album, What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits, you have an accidental hit. I love the story that Black Water originally, which is 100% written by you and sung by you, originally it was just the B-side of the first single, which was Tom's song, Another Park, Another Sunday. How does a B-side become a #1 song?
Mississippi moon, won't you keep on shining on me? Mississippi moon, won't you keep on shining on me? Yeah, keep on shining your light. Gonna make everything great. Mama gonna make everything alright. And I ain't got no worries, 'cause I ain't in no hurry.
Those were the days so something like that could happen. It was, happy accident, really. I will give credit to people that were working at Warner's in those days.
The promo guys, the marketing guys?
Yeah, they saw that there was interest and pumped it up. Like I have a friend, so I stay in touch with Al Moss. He lives in, he's in Nashville.
Right, he's a radio promo guy, Al Moss, right?
Yes, and exactly. And he has his own company now, but back then he was working with Warner's. And, he and a couple other guys followed up, noticing that it was getting some attention, and said, and then went back to the label and said, you guys should think about re-releasing this as an A-side. They were saying, we can get this played if you give it to us. And so they did it.
I heard you say you were in Europe when someone came up to you and said, "Hey, you guys have a hit." And you're like, "What song?" And they said, "Blackwater." And you're like, "What?"
That's exactly right. Yeah, we had no idea. We were on I want to say we were on the Warner Brothers music tour, which was a tour with Little Feat, Grand Central Station, Tower Power, Montrose.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a sponsored tour. We went all around Europe and played.
It sounds like a lot of Northern California bands on that tour.
It was almost all and it was all Bay Area people.
Right. So if you said Montrose, that's a young Sammy Hagar in Europe with you then, too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sammy and Ronnie were part of that.
So whose idea was it? Was it Ted's idea to do the a cappella breakdown in Blackwater?
It was. Yeah, I had a different concept. I was thinking it would go to, maybe bring in a Dixieland trio or quartet or 5-piece or something, and break it down to, sort of horns and vocals. I had the vocals that were already there, and Ted said, "No, let me try something. I have an idea," and then broke it down to the a cappella thing and showed it to me. I go, "I love that. That works for me." I think I said, "What about the Dixieland?" He goes, "I think it's better this way. Trust me." And he often used to say, "Trust me." And I'd go, right. "I do. Okay. I do. I trust you."
But the fact that there's an a cappella breakdown on a #1 song on Top 40 radio in 1975 kind of blows your mind.
Yeah, no, that was really oddball.
By the hand, take me by the hand, pretty mama, come and dance with your daddy all night long. I'd like to hear some funky Dixieland, pretty mama, come and take me by the hand. By the hand, take me by the hand, pretty mama, come and dance with your daddy all night long. I'd like to hear some funky Dixieland, pretty mama, come and take me by the hand. By the hand, take me by the hand.
And then, the hits keep coming. You guys do the Stampede record, which is a little less successful, but you're, chart-wise. But then Tom, starts having health problems with some ulcers. At what point does Mike McDonald join the band?
We were on the road, actually, probably a while after we had released that album. And just, doing our regular summertime tour. And I want to say we were down south somewhere, or maybe we were in Illinois, and I think we were actually in the Midwest. We played a gig, and Tom didn't show, and we had to go on and do the show without him, and that was a scary moment. I had to cover most of his vocals, wow. And but it was okay. I mean, we got through the show, and we had actually asked the audience whether they would rather have their money back. And it was a big show. There were probably 10 or 15,000 people at this venue. And so we were very nervous about, the fact that we would have to give back all that money. Well, on us, it was okay. But on the promoter, it would have been very unhappy. Sure. But we knew, and we would have had to cover all the costs. Right. It kind of was an act of God, and they do have insurance for that kind of stuff. They're required to have it, but still, it puts everybody in a bind.
Had Tom given you a heads up that he was not feeling well?
We knew he hadn't felt well. We had done several shows prior to that, and he struggled to get through them. But we thought, well, we don't have that many shows left. Maybe we can finish this leg of the tour, and then we'll just take a break. And no, it wasn't to be. He left before the tour was out. We still had about 3 weeks worth of shows, 3 or 4 weeks. And So that's when I said, well, maybe we should cancel these shows. And Jeff and Tyran said, hey, man, we can, you can do this. Just we'll rehearse, here, and you take over the vocals, and the rest of us will, do the backgrounds, and we'll get through it. And I said, I don't know, I said, we really need something to beef up maybe we can get another guitar player. Jeff says, well, how about keyboards? And I go, well, that would work. I said, we always had Bill Payne on all the records, and Bill had done some shows with us from time to time. Jeff says, well, he said, I don't know if you remember the guy that was singing backgrounds for Steely Dan. And I said, I do. He said, yeah, that's Mike McDonald. He said, I think he's really a great keyboard player and a great singer. If you want, I'll call him and have him come out. And so we said, okay, let's do it.
Wow.
So he called, and Mike was there the next day. We had a day off, and then we had a gig, and we switched the gig. We put the gig in another later on in the tour, came back and did it. I think we took 2 full days, rehearsed, felt like we could go out and do the shows, and went on and finished the leg. And that's really where we discovered what a super talent Mike was. I mean, as soon as he started singing, it was pretty obvious to anyone.
His voice is going to bring a different color to the band. Did it take time for the band's kind of DNA to change with Mike in the band, singing those harmonies, and then eventually bringing his own songs to the group?
It immediately gelled in terms of doing what we had been doing. In other words, we weren't doing any new songs or Mike's material yet. He was singing backgrounds. He could sing low, he could sing high. We just worked out the harmonies, and mainly that was probably my biggest concern, because we have, we work off of 3-part harmonies.
Right.
Not having that third harmony, makes it was probably just me, being much more sensitive to the situation that we had,
right.
Wanting to hear things in the way that they had been. So as soon as Mike was there covering that third harmony, I felt confident of the backgrounds.
Right.
And then with hearing Mike sing, I thought, oh, geez, he could sing some of the songs that maybe even with a different voice, he's such a great singer. He'll bring life to those songs.
Right.
So things like "Take Me in Your Arms," we sang "Long Train Running" together. I would sing some stuff. Mike would sing stuff. "Jesus Is Just All Right." He was right there.
Right.
And then I covered most of the other tunes that we have been doing. And then we do a lot of songs like, "Jesus" is pretty much the whole song is 3-part harmonies.
Right.
"Without You" is pretty much another song we do with 3-part harmonies.
At what point do you realize that Mike has writing talent too?
I think Mike played some songs for me. The plan was to go in and do a new record when we got back. And that record was Taking to the Streets, was the record that became. And I had already written, I think I had about 3 or 4 songs written. And Tommy had about the same, 3 or 4 songs. And we had started working on his songs and my songs, but we were going to be short a couple of songs coming in. So the way the wind was blowing, Tom wasn't going to be able to contribute as much to the record. So that meant I was going to have to write some more songs, which I was willing to do, but we had a kind of a short window because we did have some live commitments, some more shows to play. I said, I don't know whether we can have any other artists or material on this record. I said, I know you must write songs. He said, yeah, I do. I have some songs. And I said, well, maybe, can I hear some of the stuff? Would you mind playing me some stuff, that you're working on, or show me something? Do you have any demos? He said, well, here's some stuff I'm working on. He started playing some of the songs that ended up on the record, one of which was Taken to the Streets, which I recognized immediately as, I didn't recognize it as a hit, because I don't know what a hit is. I don't know if anyone really knows, but I knew that it was a really well crafted, for me, a really exciting song. And when I heard it, I went, "Oh my God, Mike, I love that." I said, "You should play that for Ted." And he's going, "Oh, I don't know. He probably isn't going to like it." And I go, "No, well, it doesn't matter. We're just experimenting here, and maybe, at some point." So that was how we entered into that. And we actually were at the studio working on a song of mine that it was the first song that Mike ever played on the record of ours, Wheels of Fortune.
Right.
And so Mike, myself, Jeff Baxter, Tommy was there to record that song with us, right. Tyran, John Hartman, and then we ended up with Richie Hayward playing drums. Bobby LeKind played congas on that with us, who was our roadie. but I heard him play. He sat in with us several times, and I thought he's a great conga player. I really like what he does, so I'm going to ask him to play on this song. So I brought them all into the studio, and we did this. We cut the track, and which I was thrilled with. Ted approached me. He said, "I think, you're going to have to step up and sing more tracks on this record, and hopefully, you can write some more songs." And I said, "Well, I am doing that. I have written more songs, and I'm happy to contribute as much as I can." But I said, "You should take a listen to Mike's songs, Mike McDonald. I think he's got some good songs." And Ted said, "Oh, Pat, I'm not sure that's a direction that we should take the band, change, with having another vocal in there, it might not, the fans might not take to it. And
wow.
They already know you, and you and Tommy have a similar timbre to your voice. Maybe I think he said, I think if you step up and write some more songs and sing, and maybe we can get Tom in to do something that we'll be able to move forward." And I said, "Well, I get that." I said, "But, you should do yourself a favor and take a listen to Mike's songs." I said, "Even if we don't use them, his songs are worth listening to for, just for your general knowledge of what a talent we have in this band these days." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Well," so he said, "Mike, Pat tells me you've got some songs, would you feel like playing something for us?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, you sure?" And he goes, yeah, go ahead. Got something. He goes, "Well, I got this one song that I've been working on. It's not finished yet, but I've started it, and it was taken to the streets." And I had heard it. I thought, "Man, this is such a great song." So Ted was behind Mike, looking at me, and Mike starts playing and singing the song, and he looks up at me. His eyes, look into my eyes, and his eyes get really wide, and he mouths, "Oh my God."
You telling me the things you're gonna do for me. I ain't blind and I don't like what I think I see. We're taking it to the streets. No more need for running. Oh, no.
And that was the beginning of Mike's, entry into the band. And from there, of course,
That's
what
a rocket ship from there.
Yeah, what a career he has.
Oh my God. And the fact, obviously Living on the Fault Line comes next, and then Minute by Minute, which is the true rocket ship with, it's the band's first #1 album. What a Fool Believes becomes the song of the year.
As she rises to her apology, anybody else would surely know. He's watching her.
it's just crazy that, eventually the band takes a break after the One Step Closer album. But fast forward to now, you're still there. Tommy's back. Mike is back. And it's like, everything that everyone has ever loved about the Doobie Brothers is now there back again in 2026. How does that feel for you?
It's pretty satisfying. I love both those guys as artists. I think they're great writers, great singers, super stylists. They have their own thing. As soon as you hear them, it's them. I have felt fortunate and still feel fortunate to, just be in the same band with those guys. And then, I've been able to contribute my songs and have them help me, musically.
You guys are still collaborating and co-writing together, right?
Yeah, we've written stuff together. We, help each other out, with, parts and on the songs in the studio. It's been fun all these years, and it continues to be that vehicle that it always was. Everything isn't full on band all the time. I never realized, when you listen to the Beatles, it's not always John and Paul. Right. A lot of it is John doing John's songs. Right. They might do something on the record, but I didn't realize John Lennon played such great bass. He's on the Long and Winding Road. That's John Lennon playing bass on the record. I thought, he's such a great, does so much more than what you ever gave him credit for.
Well, the band's always been a band. Even Tyrone was writing on the early albums. It seemed to me, just looking from afar, it seemed like it was a democracy. It wasn't like, no, it's my way. Everybody had a shot at getting a song on a record.
I think we were probably much more protective of our what we offered up. You got an idea? Well, what is it? Okay, go try it. And it was always, oh, wow, that's really good. As time went on, we realized, just put it out there and let everybody else add whatever. It's a multi-track recording. If you don't like it, in the end, you don't have to use it or whatever. And that's kind of the attitude we all came with. Well, I have an idea. Can I try it? And everybody would go, yeah, sure, go ahead. Right. And we would do things, and sometimes it worked, and other times it was like, you'd know right away.
Right, but you gotta try it, and best idea wins, right?
That's right, and that's what's fun about making records, especially in a band. It's one thing you do it at home, or with your own songs when you're adding your ideas of your own. But it's really something when somebody comes along with an idea that lifts your song from a C+ to a B+. Right. It's just an amazing thing to you go, oh my God, I never would have thought of that. Well, thank you. That's do I have to give you writing credit?
The last album that you guys did together came out last June of 2025, Walk This Road. And that's everybody. That's you and Tom and McPhee and Mike McDonald. Mavis Staples is on there. Mick Fleetwood's on there. The great, Hawaiian uke player Jake Shimabukuro's on there. So is there plans to make another record, another Doobies album? Soon? We're
working on it right now. I've got 3 songs that I'm working on. One that I've kind of really written that's, I don't know, totally finished, but it's real close. And then another song that I'm working on with my son. Actually, we wrote a song together.
Your son lives in Hawaii, right?
He does. Yeah, he plays and sings. He's got an act. He does. He's
runs in the family.
Yeah, more local. He doesn't like the road or any of that. He just loves playing, and he loves Hawaiian music. He's really into the local scene. But we got a song we're working on right now, anyway. Awesome. And then and then I have one other song. We I don't know if I should even say this because we don't know whether it's going to happen now. But we've been talking with Shooter Jennings.
Oh, he's so good.
And would like to try and do some stuff with him. We love working with John Shanks. We did the last couple of records with John, and I'd still like to record some stuff with John. I just think he's a brilliant producer, writer.
Shooter produces all the Charlie Crockett records, which are so good.
Right. So, we might cut some tracks with him. I don't know. We're just experimenting. We're still trying to grow. As
55 years in, you're still trying to grow. That's hats off to you, man. You could have started coasting a long time ago, and you're not.
Yeah, it's so much fun, and I don't know. Shooter's a great guy. I've known him for several years. I sort of knew his dad, so that was not that that's any in or anything, but I loved.
Well, fingers crossed. That could be really cool creatively. Yeah. One last thing I want to bring up before we wrap up. When I was a kid, I remember turning on TV when I was around 12 years old and watching a show called What's Happening, and all of a sudden the Doobie Brothers are there. What do you remember about that and the legendary line, "Which doobie you be," which one of the characters said that has become lore at this point? Do you remember fondly about taping that?
I do. Yeah, no, we had a ball doing it. That was brought to us by, I don't know if I should even mention his name, but David Guest. David Guest, he was our
publicist, right?
Yeah, he was our publicist.
Later married to Liza Minnelli.
Yeah, he made her life miserable. But poor Liza. I saw that one coming. I wished I would have known her. I could have maybe
given her a heads up.
Right. I could have talked her out of it. But well, he fell for her really hard, and then he fell out and made her miserable.
But David Guest is the one who made the connection between the Doobie Brothers and What's Happening.
He did. He was friends with the producer of the show and the director, and brought it to us. And I don't think everybody was keen to do it at first. They were nervous about doing a TV show at all. Everybody was like, "Oh, that's selling out." And I go, "No, it's something fun to do." And I watched the show. I loved that show. I thought it was just such it's great for a suburban guy like me, a white suburban guy, to see a wonderfully crafted, black comedy like that. It was just, to me, I just loved the show. I thought it was so funny.
Right.
It was, so many inside things happening, and it was like the dance era. There was so much great R&B music going on at the time. So I thought, well, this is a great way for us to reach an audience that liked our music, but we hadn't really connected with that audience. And I felt like that helped us connect with black audiences a lot more.
Right. And you guys performed Taking It to the Streets with Mike's vocal, which is a soulful vocal. And the show was so popular that it definitely spread the word of the Doobie Brothers to become even more of a household name. So it was a good thing.
It was wonderful. We had a real Memphis connection. That's where we met David. He was doing publicity for Al Green at the time.
I'm glad you brought that up with Al Green, because you and the great Willie Mitchell wrote a song that you wanted Al Green to perform, and Al Green didn't record it, so it ended up on the Living on the Fault Line album. It's a song called Echoes of Love, and it was later covered by the Pointer Sisters.
I hear your voice everywhere, echoes of love, making me look back over my shoulder, echoes of love, starting all over, echoes of love, keeps on hurting, they're out of control, keeps on burning, echoes of love, are out of control, bring it back.
One of the biggest thrills of my life. I was friends with James Mitchell, who's Willie's brother. James was playing baritone sax. Well, he played baritone sax in the Memphis Horns. James wrote all those great string arrangements for Al Green. Let's Get Together, all those wonderful. I mean, he's a great writer. He would sit and write, tablature for the horns and strings. He's just a brilliant guy. And so he introduced me to his brother and the family, and I I said to James, "You think Willie?" I said, "He's such a great writer," because he and Willie and Al had written all that great, or not all, but a lot of those great songs for Al's records. And I thought, God, I'd love to write a song with him. So I had this. My idea was originally kind of an Al Green kind of a song. It really turned into something different because it really made it more pop and more Doobie Brothers than it would have been otherwise.
That's so funny.
But anyway, I sent him a home tape that I made. I had a reel-to-reel tape. I made it, and Willie took the tape, recorded it to his multi-track, and then cut the tape in pieces and put it back together so that what I thought was the verse became the chorus, and what I thought was the chorus became the verse. Awesome. And then he wrote the song over the top of that with another guy.
Right.
And
Earl Randall. What a great what a great experience, right? So, like I said, here we are 55 plus years later. It's March 2026. The Doobies are co-headlining the Oneness Tour 2026 with Santana across North America. Dates start in June, end up in late August, close to 30 dates. Tickets on sale now. More music coming. Anything else as closing words from your home in Washington State this fine Saturday morning, Pat?
Just feel fortunate to still be doing this, and I encourage everyone to live their lives to the fullest. I really have had a great life, and every day is a gift.
100%.
Remember that.
And the gift, of the music that you and the guys have added, to the soundtrack of everyone's lives, over the last 55 years is a gift as well. So appreciate your time and congratulations on everything. And thank you so much, Patrick Simmons.
Oh, likewise. Thank you. Appreciate it, Pete.
When the sun comes up on a sleepy little town down around San Antonio, and the folks are rising for another day, round about their home. The people of the town are strange, and they're proud of where they came. Where you talking about China Road? Whoa, China Road.
Thanks again to Patrick Simmons for joining us this week. From the early days in Northern California to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and now the Songwriters Hall of Fame, his career is a masterclass in longevity, evolution, and musical identity. Whether it's the laid-back brilliance of Black Water, the emotional depth of his songwriting, or the role he's played in holding together one of the most dynamic bands in American music history, Patrick's influence runs deeper than most people realize. The Doobie Brothers are back on the road and probably coming to a city near you, including on their 2026 tour with Santana, continuing to bring together generations of fans with a catalog spanning styles, eras, and decades. For more info and current tour dates, visit their website, theDoobieBrothers.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time for another episode of Rock and Roll High School.
Rock and Roll High School is a presentation of Pure Tone Music, produced by Pete Ganbarg with assistance from Steve Leeds, Joe Pomerico, Dana Stenson, Aaron Manuza, Christina Katsamanides, and Rich Mahan. Please visit our website at rockschoolpodcast.com for past episodes and information on what's coming next. All rights reserved.